Good day and welcome to session 2.3 on monitoring of global citizenship in education. My name's Esther Kerr. You know, monitoring is fascinating because it tells us so much about the nature of what is being monitored and what impacts on how an initiative or a concept is implemented. And so today you'll hear some of those insights from global and from regional perspectives. So the session includes 4 speakers and a discussion session. And as you listen to the speakers, please jot down your questions and your comments in the chat box so that we can ensure that we address any pressing issues or just clarify points as needed. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. First of all, we'll have Dr. Roshan Bajracharya, and he is a Senior Regional Advisor for Asia and the Pacific in UNESCO Institute of Statistics, and he will be joining us online today. Dr. Bajracharya has been working with global, regional and national partners in strengthening country capacities in statistical systems, particularly education statistics, for the last, or more than, the last 12 years. He's contributed significantly to developing national SDG 4 monitoring and educational statistics frameworks by designing and implementing statistical programs and projects for the strengthening of the education data that we all collect. Dr. Bajracharya has also contributed to the development of a conceptual framework for monitoring SDG 4.7 and methodological development for measuring SDG 4.7.4 and 4.7.5. So it will be welcome to him. Our second speaker, also joining us online, unfortunately, is Ralph Carstens, and he's the Senior Research Advisor for the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement. Such a mouthful, but we mostly recognise that by saying IEA. And so with a background in primary and lower secondary teaching, Ralph Carstens has worked in international large-scale assessments in education for 2 decades. He's been covering aspects such as conceptual development, instrument design, survey methods, data analysis and communications, a really, really important part of the work that we all do. His experience with IEA studies includes TEDS-M and ICELS, and he's also collaborated with PIAC, LSCE, that's the MENA study, and ERSE. Ralph co-directed the International Civics and Citizenship Education Study, ICCS, 2016 for IEA, and the Teaching and Learning International Survey, TALIS, 2018 for the OECD. So I'm really sorry about all those acronyms, but of course you can have a look at his bio and deconstruct those. Then next we'll have Dr. Rachel Parker, who is sitting next to me today in Seoul, and she is a Senior Research Fellow in the Educational Monitoring and Research Division at the Australian Council for Educational Research. Rachel's contributed both in Australia and internationally on intercultural competence, global citizenship, and global learning pedagogy and practice. For the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics Program, often known as CPLM, Rachel has led a team to design a global citizenship assessment framework for the ASEAN region, for CMEO and UNICEF, through analysis of the curricula of 9 ASEAN countries. And so that work has been undertaken within the context of how global learning fosters intercultural competence and, hopefully, reduces prejudice. And then last we have Professor Hwanbo Park, and he's an Associate Professor in the Department of Education at Chungnam National University in the Republic of Korea. And he will join us through a pre-recording. Dr. Park is the Director of the Centre for Global Citizenship Education at Chungnam. He has an expertise and a PhD in Sociology of Education from Seoul National University, and his research relates to educational policy evaluation with comparative and international perspectives. And he also has been engaged in the monitoring of implementation of GCED and its impact on students. And so for over 10 years, he's been engaged in educational development cooperation projects and research in developing countries. And he will be joined for the Q&A part of our work by Professor Joel. And he is a professor also sitting next to me here in the Department of Social Studies Education, College of Education at Sungshin Women's University in Korea. And as a teacher educator in social studies and civics, Professor Jo is investigating the implementation of GCED in the secondary school level. And so he's been focusing on empowerment of students as well as the competencies of teachers in local schools. He's been a researcher and curriculum developer in the revision project of the 2022 National Social Studies Curriculum in the Republic of Korea. He's also very closely worked with AppCU as a researcher on this and allied projects, including looking at the implementation status of GCE, looking at the national monitoring framework for that, and contributing to GCE curriculum development and integrated in a number of countries. So that's our lineup for today. We have a great deal of expertise to bring to some significant issues as we move ahead. Before we go into handing over to our first speaker, I want to raise a few signposts. First of all, behind every data point that we collect for monitoring in surveys and tools that you're going to hear about today, there lies a child or an adolescent. And each of those is an individual, each with very different understandings about concepts of citizenship and very different attitudes and values. So that's the first point. The second is each of those children and adolescents lives in a very different space, whether it's physical, emotional, cultural, or familial. And of particular relevance today, they live in a space that varies from almost no technologies to a room full. So we need to be particularly careful of not assuming that our world or our reality is the same as that of someone else. So we need to think about digital transformation. To whom does it actually apply and how? And that leads to keep in mind that whatever the degree of digital transformation, its role in the education space is one thing. Its role in the monitoring space is another. So please think about those points as you listen to our speakers over the next little while. And with that, I'd like now to hand over to Dr. Baj Racharia. Roshan, over to you. Welcome.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are from, you are sitting. So I think it's unfortunate that I couldn't join the meeting online in person. It could be more exciting to be there and then discussing this kind of very important issues. Anyway, so actually this we haven't talked about the digital transformation, and then this also bring us here to be able to speak from the Bangkok. As introduced, my name is Roshan. I'm a senior regional advisor for the UIS, the Asia Pacific region, based in Bangkok. So as introduced, the topic, this is a very broad topic when we talk about SDG 4, especially target 4.7. It includes wide range of concepts and issues in acquiring knowledge and then skills needed in to promote sustainable development, including sustainable development, lifestyle, human rights, gender equality, promotion of culture and peace, and then non-violence, global citizenship. All kind of things are mentioned in the target 4.7. So it's a very wide range of issues and concept has been included in the target itself. And then most of the concept, as mentioned by Professor Esther, it could be understood in a different understanding, and that definition could be in a different way. That is quite a challenging when we have a different definitions and understanding of the concept. When it comes to monitoring, it's quite challenging. So of course, this being the difficulty in agreeing on conceptual analytical framework, and then definitely it's result into challenging monitoring and measurement. Just to quickly look at global and thematic indicators for 4.7. As you know, like we have one global indicators and then the 4 other thematic indicators included in the frame. Including in this frame, the 4.7.1, which is the global indicator, is being collected by UNESCO, and then UIS actually started reporting on it. UNESCO headquarters has developed their own specific tools to collect data from the countries, and then we have started reporting in our database. So this is definitely a very key indicator to see like how countries are integrating different concepts in national policies, curricula, teacher education, and student assessment. Another indicator that we started collecting and publishing is a percentage of schools that provide life skills-based SIV and sexuality education. This is the thematic indicators, and then UIS, we collect this indicator through our annual survey that goes to each of the countries, and then we start reporting on it. Extent to which the framework on the World Program on Human Rights Education. Again, this is coming from UNESCO headquarters. And then last two indicators, 4.7.4 and 4.7.5, which is very much based on competencies of the students on showing adequate understanding of issues relating to global citizenship and sustainability, and then the environmental science and geoscience. We have started reporting on it using international large-scale assessments. So, but we started working on it, but still the data coverage, in terms of data coverage, is still very limited. This kind of concept is not very much, widely available in the large-scale assessment. It's very only particular kind of assessments that they included, not in all kind of things. That is also one of the things that we need to look at. If you really want to see how this monitoring is moving, the progress is moving towards achieving the target, then definitely we need to improve the coverage of these indicators, not only in certain countries. But one of the things that we need to look at is like how we can really include those kind of concepts in the national assessment. That could be another area to be looked at. The countries have national assessments. Whether this kind of concept can be also included in the national assessment. So that could be one of the way to expand the coverage. But at the same time, there's a lot of challenges of comparability, all kind of things also to be looked at when to use in the national assessment. So yes, a challenge like coverage is limited. Difficult for countries to articulate all the indicators under target 4.7. Quality is also in challenge. Even some of the countries also use this concept in the national assessment. Comparability is an issue. Even within the international assessment, the comparability and then the definition or different type of things are used in different way. And then of course capacity to produce the data is a challenge. So UIS actually start working on with partnering with different agencies through its TCG. We have developed a guideline for data collection to measure SDG 4.7.4 and 4.7.5, particularly for these two indicators, where, of course, most of the concept has been taken from international large-scale assessments, but this guide is mainly to strengthen, if the countries, if they wanted to strengthen or include this kind of concept, what kind of things that they need to think about, how they can integrate those concepts into your assessment, and then how they make sure that this is reliable data. So this kind of all kind of technical as well as procedural type of guidelines have been provided in the guideline, this guideline. So of course, in this guide, we also try to see, as you say, like definition can be different. At least we need to have some kind of a working definition for measurement. So this definition has been provided in the guide, based on which the countries at least see, think about how the things can be measured or monitored. So in the guide, the global citizenship education has been defined as it is to nurture respect for all, building a sense of belongings to a common humanity and helping learners become responsible and active global citizens. GCED aims to empower learners to assume active roles to face and resolve global challenges and to become proactive contributor to a more peaceful, tolerant, and inclusive and secure world. The same way, education for sustainable development, ESD, is defined as empowers learners to take informed decision and responsible action for environmental integrity, economic viability, and a just society for present and future generations while respecting cultural diversity. So it is about lifelong learning, and it is an integral part of quality education. So this is the working definition that has been adopted in the frame. So of course, to design the assessment for 4.7.4 and 4.7.5, this global content framework provides a key basis what kind of skills to be assessed. So this global content framework provides a kind of broad category and then also details of the subcategories that based on that 4.7.1, that is the extent to which different concept of GCED and STD integrated in policies, in curricula, teachers training and assessment can be monitored, and same one can be also used to see how the students' knowledge and skills that the students should have in various categories of GCED and ESD should be measured and monitored. So this actually is provide a very good framework with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories, categorical areas, different concepts and contents that need to be included. Operationalizing the GCED and the ESD concept for measurement, of course, there were global content framework, as said, like it in 2019 it was discussed, and then using large-scale assessment, the mapping is undertaken to see the alignment, especially ICCED, PISA, and other large-scale assessment has been used to see the alignment, and then incorporate the 3 core dimensions: cognitive, socioeconomic, and behavior, to measure learning outcomes in GCED in the mapping exercise. So the thing is like, yes, that now we have guides, we have methodologies are developed. The thing is like how we can really improve the coverage of the data. That is the challenge. So how can we encourage countries to use the methodologies and concept in the national assessment or different assessment. So this is one of the things that we need to look at. So it's been now 7 years. We have still talking about it. but data coverage is still very limited. Another one is about, we have Esther there. So actually Esther can explain more on this one. So she's the leading person in developing this indicator. So there was a new indicator developed in 2020s where the exercise started on 4.7.1. So this indicator is mainly to giving attention to the concept of intended, planned, implemented, and experienced learning as captured through the system, school, and classroom teacher evidence. So it is only not about seeing like what has been planned, but also see like how this has been implemented, and then how kids are learning from using or experiencing those intended, planned environments. So that is the intention of the indicator. This new indicator. So new indicator is the extent to which national education policies and education sector plans recognize a breadth of skills that need to be enhanced in national education system. So yes, national education sector plan is developed, but hardly discuss about the different type of skills that need to be nurtured for the students. So this indicator is definitely help to see like how national sector plans are embedding such kind of skills in their planning. But again, I said like this is not about just to see like what is intended, but also to see like how it is planned and then how it is implemented across different teaching, learning, assessment areas. The indicator was actually for indicator. Some of the tools were developed. So Esther was heavily involved in that process, and then some indicators has been developed. They were piloted, and then some of the recommendations has been provided to further improvement. So these are the areas. Aspect that has been included in this new indicator. It is actually all three aspects: teaching and learning, assessment and accountability, and enabling environment. These are three aspects to be looked at, and then it looked at what kind of intended focus has been given in the system to see how the teaching learning should be improved, and then also try to see how it is planned and implemented at the school level. But at the end, what matters is how students are experiencing those planned or intended environment. So the three aspects, three areas, it has been assessed. So it's a quite a comprehensive indicator, but same time, again, data coverage is to be looked at how we are going to expand it to the countries, and then how we are going to collect the data from the countries in the full coverage. That is also still need to be discussed. So far, UIS doesn't have any data in our website, in our database, because it needs to be rolled out in a way that the data start coming. So with this, I will stop here. So if you have any questions, any queries, I will be happy to respond. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roshan. Great to hear about not only the global indicators, but the thematic ones. Very happy to hear that. So we'll move over now from that overarching SDG monitoring level to one of the main contributors to that monitoring through international large-scale assessment programs. And so we will now move over to Ralph Carstens, who's coming in from Dublin. Hello, Ralph. Welcome.
Hello, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Esther, thank you for the kind introduction. Trying to share my screen in the meantime. My excuse for not being with you is actually an event in Dublin, where today ministers of education and country delegations will hopefully agree on a new declaration for global education for the period between now and 2050. And it's a well-networked and well-attended event, I can say. So it's definitely interesting, and I recommend that everyone takes a look at that declaration. For the title, I just basically blended sort of the headlines from two of the studies I want to talk about. The organizers asked me to reflect and explain a little bit of what these two, ICCS and ICRLS, IA, are doing, but also to reflect on the question of what an indicator could capture the intersection between the digital transformation and global citizenship education. So I'll try to do just that. I hope you can see the screen. So I think the conference, really nicely demonstrates how well the intersection is understood. Looking at presentations yesterday I saw from Alton Grizzle or from Janice Richardson. And I'm not going to read everything out. I think it becomes clear there's a tremendous potential with digital media. I have a teenage son at home. You really use this, to a window to the world in ways that in our youth were, not possible, or citizen journalism, where something, becomes known to the general public that otherwise would not have been visible. But there are also tremendous risks. One of our studies really challenges the notions of digital natives that are not digital experts, and I'll go into details there a little bit. Esther, you gave us some ideas to think about. There's definitely a digital divide, whether it's access. We had colleagues from Ukraine here yesterday reporting that with power outages, even the digital learning is off the menu. But they have wounded education, but they still say it's alive. There's definitely an element of addiction and manipulation. And I think that's quite worrying, and you see this in general elections play out just recently, I believe, in Brazil, and we're going to see this in the midterms in the United States probably also, where an algorithm is targeting the people who are on the fence between, two polarized camps in a political landscape, and all of those sorts of things. I want to point to one relatively new source, and that's Jürgen Habermas, who just published a range of essays on exactly that new structural change in the way that public discourse takes place. And that's just a quote. And that makes you wonder why just maybe a handful or less than a handful of large corporation platforms and individual control much of the space in which public debate happens these days. So IA studies in this space, I want to mention the International Civic and Citizenship Education Study, ICCS, where we look really of how young people are prepared to undertake their roles as citizens. Of course they are, but they, as they, approach voting age, for example. And it's quite explicit about information reliability, something that is at that intersection of global citizenship and digital. We had a couple of cycles. The 2022 collection just completed, and there will be a report for next year. And we have also started to think about what to do and expand or downplay a little bit in 2027. The other one is the International Computer and Information Literacy Study, ICILS, and that's how well students are prepared for study, work, and life in a digital world. So that's a related but a different view on how kids, what they can do with digital information. And there it focuses on digital information and democratic principles. And I think I actually messed these two up. I will make a correction. That second bullet point should be exchanged. We're now in the third cycle. The collection for 2023 is underway. Countries just decided what they want to take into the main survey, and the scoping will continue. And that's why I think this event is quite helpful for us to see where we could take these two studies. Now, both, and I'll just use examples here, use models to support their conceptual frameworks and underpinnings. And I say support because none of them are slavishly connected to any existing conceptual model. I'm just putting here Bronfenbrenner's ecological model of child sort of upbringing, where the child is at the center, and you have micro, meso, and exosystems, the macro system, and that's culture. We get to this in a moment as well, and also the chronosystem, where all of the sort of large world events, maybe armed conflict, war, or climate distortion might sit. And I think it's helpful to illustrate that probably none of these issues are entirely local and none of them are entirely global. They all span this, and digital media cuts across all of these areas, as I said, as sort of a window to the world. The other one is an exhibit from the just published framework for ICCS 2022, where you can see where we take this to an educational level from antecedents, processes, and then outcomes, and how these studies try to capture what's maybe defined or done at the system level, but also at the other sort of levels, community, home context, sort of the variables that you can or cannot do much about, how then learning takes place and education takes place in schools, and what the outcomes of those are. Now, I heard, moving to that second question, that humor is quite helpful. So I took this from my favorite science cartoon blog. And while you look at this, I want to, maybe challenge a little bit that question I was given, like, what's the best indicator to do this? And Esther, you said, the children have all of these different facets and they live in different contexts. So how on earth could we describe a person by just one characteristic, like its weight or its height or the language the person speaks and so on? That's going to be quite hard. But when we sit and we design or compose these studies, we look at quality criteria, we look at the components, again, inputs, outputs, outcomes. We look at dimensions. Do we want to focus on crystallized knowledge and understanding, or higher order thinking skills and perceptions, actual engagement and behaviors, or at least, what children intend to do? Do we want to do this through a direct assessment or something that is self-declared, self-efficacy? Do we want to go just after existence? Yes, I do this, or how often I do it, or how it actually works, what the teacher does in the classroom if there is debate about controversial issues, if there is an open climate, and how it actually impacts. And typically in webinars like this, at this point in the chat, questions come up and saying, how can we increase country coverage, including lower middle income countries? And the first presenter has alluded to this. How can we capture informal and non-formal learning and all of this? Which is, of course, we have to recognize that people's ability to understand information, to use tools, is not only something that they pick up in formal education. It's also something they pick up informally. They self-teach. They pick up with peers and in the family. And I would recommend that you look at also the component of adult learning in a section of the global report on adult learning and education that just came out this June, that reflects on precisely the topic of the conference. The work related to SDG 4, and I think you heard a little bit about this, ICCS tried to relate itself closer to target 4.7 and in particular to thematic indicator 4.74. That's actually where much of the inspiration for it, I believe, comes from. Ever since that first technical consultation on global citizenship education in September of 2013 in Seoul at APCU. And we expand cycle by cycle the way in which global aspects are reflected in this. And 2022 will have much more. What we did there, we tried to classify the item pool also by GCED and ESD. And that has been tough and hard, and it's not possible everywhere. So again, this gives us a sense that some of these conceptions are overlapping to a large degree, and also that no single aspect or issue is just entirely local or entirely global. There's a TIMS environmental awareness skill. I just popped this in here. That is also, or can be related to thematic indicator 4.75. And in that study, in the 2023 cycle now, there's going to be expanded coverage and depth forthcoming, teaching practices, students' perceptions on this, and so on. We just heard a great deal about the UNESCO UIS measurement strategies. I have this in the references. The original strategy was from 2017. I helped a little bit on the sidelines with this, and it's been updated and much more mature in 2020. And ISILS relates to target 4.4, and I think both these studies cover some of these intersections here, but not perfectly. Now, to indicators that ICCS and ICILS can offer, I have one slide on the achievement scales, one slide on questionnaires. Both explicitly address critical evaluation of information, or in the ISILS case, more specifically digital information, yet from different perspectives. And in these two assessments, we use levels to describe what students know and can do. And for what we call critical digital literacy, It's otherwise maybe called media information literacy, as we heard yesterday. There are really two key points in ICELs. One is the transition between levels 2 and 3, where students are demonstrating what we call autonomy. And the other is level 3 and 4, and those show then clearer evidence of critical elements of digital literacy, as we describe students that quote unquote perform at that particular level. Just one statistic here, for example, there are really only 2% across the participating countries in ICELS 2008 that are at that highest level 4, where they execute control and evaluative judgment. And in some way, if you look at the agenda setting and aspirations of SDG 4.4, you would like all of them to be up there. And in some way, the way that the world works these days, it's quite necessary probably. ICCS is not explicit about the mode of information gathering. Levels A and B here, and it could be traditional media, news, linear television. It could be something that they picked up in other form. Radio probably is going to die out pretty quickly, but they have clear references to making decisions and critical appraisal of the information, again from wherever it is sought. And levels C and D have then examples implicitly referring to other higher order forms of awareness of civic concepts and issues. And I want to mention that in ICCS 2022, again, the collection has just been completed. We have 3 computer-enhanced items. So, mini scenarios like, imagine you are setting up a poll, a digital initiative where you want people to sign up and support it. What would you do to get more people to support it and to sign in? How would you modify the information? Would you stay on the side of giving factual information, or would you make it a little bit more dramatic so that more people would buy into the concept? So that's how we're exploring how kids actually could participate. Civic participation and engagement for them looks like in a digital environment. And we are not quite decided yet whether that is going to be a separate thematic report, if it's going to come out at the main report, but it's something that speaks directly to this conference theme. And then in the questionnaires, and again, the breadth of skill 4.76, I would like to argue a little bit for the breadth of indicators. Again, if we just have achievement, and we know, that country is a 472 and that country is a 522, that those averages, they conceal more than they actually reveal. So I think we need to take into consideration also other aspects from these conceptual frameworks. And in ICCS, it's a more directly relevant. In 2022, we asked students explicitly about the use of digital technology for civic-related activities, or other questions address this in a not so direct way. It was already addressed in 2016, but we'll report on it in more detail. And then teachers are also explicitly asked about their teaching in that particular space with the use of digital technologies, which is new for 2022. And maybe as a side note, it's not on the slide, that TALIS 2024, the OECD Teaching and Learning International Study, and our work with the questionnaire group, we will also have aspects of the use of digital technologies in education related to particular teachers. In ICELS, the questions, because it's computer information literacy, it has a receptive strand and a productive strand to this. They cover a much broader range of digital activities and are less relevant to this explicit topic, and that's civics and citizenship issue at of global relevance. And the last pitch I would like to make here is also again arguing for breadth rather than maybe a single indicator, that's percentage or something like this. What we find, which I find remarkable, is routinely more variation within than across countries. So if you look at all of the average on any measure that is collected in these large-scale assessment, and you look at the same, how it's distributed by socioeconomic status, about region or gender within the country, we find routinely more variation within and across countries. And some groups of the population that you could clearly identify as being at risk of not being prepared in the best way. So I think it's equally interesting to look at schools, teachers, and students' profiles. You know, what does an individual school do, or what the teachers do and students do, and how can we describe them rather than just distribution average, or again, any single indicator. Again, it's just width or height, or that is maybe falling short to describe the system in a comprehensive way. And I want to mention the composite models that, for example, Kennisnet for imbalance is used in the Netherlands to describe digital and ICT education. There are two major strand human elements and technical elements. One is vision, which you could interpret as the conceptual, the policy level. The other is expertise, what the teachers know and do. And then we have content and application, that actually the tools are there, and digital infrastructure. And this model, for example, you want all of those to be in balance, whereas the finding in a number of countries, including my own, Germany, Schulen ans Netz, schools to the net, was basically that it's an initiative that was largely driven by technical infrastructure, but not much else. Two other things I would like to mention. A recent report edited by Ernesto Trevino on the concept of good citizenship has done profile analysis, person-centered analysis, and describing groups of students that either having a comprehensive profile or an anomic profile. And I think this takes us into another debate than just looking at averages on scales per country, because here we can talk about groups of people or the particular set of attitudes in a combined way. And I want to mention something else that Judith Thorney-Porter, who was influential in the civic and civic education space since the late 1960s and early 70s, also in IEA. And that was a cluster analysis she did also to predict types of students that are disaffected or alienated or fully engaged with civic principles in the community, for example. So I just want to put this out there, that there are other ways of looking at data and combining it in meaningful ways that I think are helpful to communicate what we find in these empirical studies. Here's a bunch of references. I believe that the presentation will be shared in one way or another, and I recommend you take a look at some of them. And I would like to thank you for your attention. If there are any questions or comments, then please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph. It was lovely to hear from you. Very clearly looking at capture globally of data and identifying the complexity as well as the choices that we have as we think about what do we need to know about global citizenship in education. And so now we'll turn away from that global and start thinking about what might be happening regionally. And so I'm going to turn over now to Rachel Parker. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Professor Kerr. My name is Rachel Parker. I am a research fellow at the Australian Council for Educational Research. The topic of my presentation today is Making Connections, Monitoring School and Teacher Readiness to Foster Global Citizenship Education. I've included my colleagues' names on my presentation because we're working closely in collaboration. Jenny Cheney, Dr. Sarah Richardson, Dr. Anna Dabrowski, and Claire Schooler. So today I'll be talking about introducing a new collaboration between Australian Council for Educational Research and APSIL. Some findings from CPLM, the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics, and from this, a new way forward regarding measuring teacher and school readiness to foster global citizenship education, some key considerations for next steps, and if there's time, some talk about digital technology and monitoring global citizenship education. Oop, I've gone the wrong way. Okay, so our study, which is funded equally between the two partners, which is an important aspect of a really strong global citizenship-related partnership, equality, is aimed to expand efforts to monitor SDG 4.7 by working with our partners in Korea, the Philippines and Australia. What we're going to be doing is consolidating literature, reviewing existing frameworks and instruments and curricula, and developing new items and tools for new contexts and cohorts. Now, the rationale for this study is that there are very few international data sources, particularly for primary education regarding global citizenship, and also for the Asia-Pacific region. We know that there is an evidence base for the value of global citizenship education in primary school. There's also a curricular base. So Asia Pacific countries have global citizenship content and concepts within their curricula. The Asia Pacific region is an important region for global citizenship, as it is more vulnerable to climate change than any other region in the world. And of course, the study aligns with all partners' priorities. So the research questions that guides our study are, firstly, what are the enabling conditions at the teacher and school level that support effective global citizenship teaching and learning? How can these conditions inform instrument development to help us better understand how ready teachers and schools are to implement global citizenship? And finally, how can these instruments be used, and what else is needed to establish sustainable global citizenship monitoring systems in the Asia Pacific region? Our methods that we'll be using are a literature review, and the lens applied to that will be an inclusive, participatory development and critical global citizenship focus. We'll also be designing instruments with experts in assessment framework and instrument design. We'll be conducting a consultation process with our tri-country stakeholder organisations, and just for your understanding, our reporting and dissemination timeframe is around February 2023. So let's talk about findings from CPLM on global citizenship. So as many of us know, CPLM is a study of 6 countries' literacy, mathematics and global citizenship knowledge, skills and experiences for grade 5 level students. And what ACER did in collaboration with a 11 country domain technical review panel was determine and decide on an assessment framework and instruments. We designed questionnaires only for teachers and students that measured knowledge, experiences, practices and attitudes and values. The results from these instruments revealed some variation in student responses, and from teachers, substantial social desirability bias, which means they had limited utility to understand teachers' readiness to implement global citizenship. There was also no teacher questionnaire. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides that present the results of CPLM. Now, there's no need to be able to read this. It's more just to show the pattern of results here. And what you can see is that most teachers responded that, yes, they were very well prepared to teach about global citizenship topics such as inequality, local current events, sustainable development, etc. So across the 6 countries, a large majority of teachers felt they had been well prepared, 70% in fact. Also, when it comes to global citizenship skills and dispositions, you see the same pattern of results, that most teachers feel that all of these skills are very important when it comes to global citizenship education. And finally, the last result I'm going to present, this one is about teacher-reported global citizenship enactments. So there's a bit more variation here, and we can see that for some of these activities, teachers reported that they occurred within their school on a regular basis, but others, such as working with students from other schools in the country or working with schools from another country, are much less likely to happen. So this is interesting for us to build on, because what it's suggesting is perhaps that teachers who reported a great degree of preparedness or confidence or experience teaching these topics may have a different conceptualisation of what they are compared with us, or not. It's an important finding to take up and research further. So what we're suggesting is a new way forward. And I should also say that our study is in the very early stages, so it's a perfect opportunity to seek feedback and input and to take this piece forward. So what we're doing is we're collating studies that measure the impact of global citizenship interventions and describe the factors relating to teaching and learning and school leadership that support this effectiveness. And we want to use these factors to create new items that are informed by what works in global citizenship education. So a shift in focus to what is done, known and valued, to how and why it is done, known and valued. And just picking up on a segue from something Ralph mentioned about a bit better understanding of what teachers and schools are doing, this is kind of where we're going with this. So here's an item from PISA 2018 Global Competence. Do the following statements reflect teachers' practices for multicultural learning in your school? So these items, in your school, students learn about the histories of diverse cultural groups that live in, say, Cambodia. It's quite easy for someone to say yes, 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 but what we want to know is actually how and why and to what extent behaviours and values and attitudes and knowledge is impacted by this teaching and learning. So here's a very early piece of work that we're producing, which is a kind of, it's starting to become an evaluative framework for global citizenship education when it comes to teachers and school leaders' readiness. So I don't expect you to be able to see this, but I might just pick one. So it's starting to look like there are 6 domains, but we may have more, we may collapse some regarding values and attitudes, background experiences, knowledge, skills, pedagogical practices and collaborative practices within schools. So thinking again that this is about teachers. So in some studies it talks about participating in professional learning. In the studies regarding global citizenship effectiveness, the professional learning is that which is experiential and practice-based. There's another indicator there that says that pre-service education fosters academic excellence while attending to cultural competence, critical analysis and activism. So again, what we're looking for are indicators that are a lot more explicit and detailed and descriptive when it comes to the why and how of effective global citizenship education to inform instrument development. Same again for school leaders and school communities. We're doing the same mapping process whereby we're bringing together these indicators regarding values and attitudes, background experiences, leading teachers, leadership practice, and school level processes and community collaboration. So again, I'll pick one, and I think this one needs a bit more work and a bit more detail, but we found in some studies that school leaders that build a open and inclusive environment are those that lead effective global citizenship interventions. So some key considerations. So as I mentioned, we are just starting out on this journey of mapping and producing this framework and tools for global citizenship understanding and readiness. Some of the challenges is the process for categorising enablers for inclusion. So we are going through this big mapping process. We have lots of literature, but also a bias within the literature. So we want to make sure that the evidence that we are evaluating and using comes from the regions in which we are working in. The questions we have at this stage, there are many. To what extent can we build on the CPLM teacher questionnaire and other instruments, including those developed in Korea? And we are looking at a very extensive teacher questionnaire that's been provided by APSIL that covers off on so many of these enabling factors for teaching practice that we would like to incorporate. What other frameworks and literature must be considered? This is something we're going back and forth on, is how we can develop instruments that will support measurement of 4.7, particularly if we choose a qualitative approach. So we're seeing that a structured interview guide makes a lot of sense when we want to answer questions about why and how. How many tools for global monitoring, classroom use, or both? So I'm going to make a swift detour into digital technology considerations for monitoring. Some of the studies that we looked at also discussed digital technology for global citizenship education and its effectiveness. And some of these factors, and others will talk about this as well, were access, skills and knowledge, and also values and attitudes, self-efficacy. So some of the enablers that supported teachers to use digital technology to positive effect or to influence students' skills and knowledge and learning were their own digital literacy skills, and also when they used the tool to support a broader framework or inquiry unit, which we've heard across other presentations, that digital technology is used as a tool to support a greater learning outcome. And I've included here a photo that, it's a still from a TikTok actually that my daughter made regarding Korean food. To illustrate this point about our perceptions about children and their capacity when it comes to digital technology. So they certainly have some familiarity with lots of different apps and social media. But when it comes to going deep, this is where a teacher and teaching framework is so valuable. And it generally to illustrate this point that we need to move away from this pervasive view of global citizenship as flags, foods and festivals, because kids are already there. We need to go deeper and have a better understanding of those factors that support effective global citizenship education. Some of the challenges regarding technology, which have been talked about already, it's rapidly changing. There's some resistance by teachers. It can trivialise serious issues, and that's why there's the picture here. It can be unreliable. So we've seen this in another study I'm working on, which is analysing 90 classroom videos filmed in Ukraine, and we've seen teachers really get flustered and struggle with technology that's dropping in and out as they're trying to use it to facilitate classroom learning. And also the readiness of learners to use digital technology for the purpose we intend it, not for the superficial or the connection or other purposes that they're currently using it for. So thank you very much for listening. 매우 감사합니다. As I mentioned, we're in the early stages of our research and we welcome feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. It's interesting that as we move from the global to the international to the regional, we're becoming increasingly specific. And we're becoming specific about the what of monitoring. Yeah. And so now we'll turn to Korea and see if that trend continues. And so I'm going to welcome Professor Park through his pre-recording, while noting our attendance today of Professor Jo, who can contribute to the discussion. So now over to Professor Park.
안녕하세요. 전 충남대학교 교육학과의
Hello, my name is
교수라고
Hanbo
합니다.
Park. I am a
저는
professor
충남대 교육연구소 산하
at
세계시민교육센터장도
Chungnam
맡고
National University,
관련
and I
연구를
also
수행하고
serve as
있습니다.
the director of the
우선
Center for
오늘
Global
세계시민교육
Citizenship
국제회의에
Education
초대받아
under the
발표할 수 있게
Education
되어
Research
대단히
Institute
기쁘고
of the same
영광스럽게
university,
생각합니다.
and I conduct related research.
그러나
First of all,
한편으로는
I'm very happy
제가
and
현재
honored to be
미국
invited
조지 메이슨
to
대학에
present
1년 동안
today.
연수는
However, on the
토론을
other
나와
hand, I would
대학생의
like to offer my
세계시민교육 역량에
apologies for
관한
not
연구를
being
수행
able to
중인
attend in
관계로
person,
회의장에
as I am
직접
currently
참석하지
conducting
못하고
research on the
이렇게
global
영상으로
citizenship education
대신
competency of
인사드리게 된 점에
university students
대해서는
at the
정말
George Mason
송구스럽게
University
생각합니다.
in the US as part of my
저는 한
one-year
사회에서
research year.
제도나 정책이
I'm interested in
어떻게
figuring out
등장하고
how an
왜
education
지금과 같은
system or
특징을
policy
갖게
emerges in
되었는지를
a society
사회 구조와의
and why
관계
it
속에서
acquires
설명하는
certain
데 관심이
characteristics
있습니다.
in relation to social
이런
structure.
학문적 관심을
And based on
토대로
these
최근에는
academic interests,
세계시민교육에
I have
관한
recently become very much interested
관심을
in
갖고 정책의
GCED
형성과 실행,
and
그리고
am
모니터링에 관한
conducting
연구를
research on
수행 중에
policy
있습니다.
formulation, implementation,
오늘은
and monitoring.
2022년에
Today, I would like to share the results of a study on the establishment of a monitoring system for GCED conducted with UNESCO APCU in 2022. I was joined by Jung-min of UNESCO APCU, Professor Jo Dae-won of Sangshin Women's University, Professor Park Jung-hee of Usok University, and Professor Tae Won-seok of Gyeongin Educational University, and also Professor Gil Ye-ji. And I understand that one of my colleagues will be responding to questions during the discussion session. So this is an overview of my presentation. As you know, since the Sustainable Development Goals were launched in 2015, the education sector has continued to make efforts to monitor the achievement of the SDG 4 goal. However, among them, unlike the other targets, which were the focus of existing global education agenda and have relatively clear targets and goals, such as the guarantee of education or improvement in educational environment, the scope of SDG 4.7 is quite broad, including the direction and content of future education, leading to difficulties in developing and monitoring common indicators at a global level. As you can see, the international community has proposed 6 indicators to monitor the progress of SDG 4.7, but among them only 4.7.1, which measures the extent to which countries mainstream GCED is being collected and managed as a global indicator. In the case of the 4.7.1, each member state conducts a survey every 4 years based on a survey developed by the UNESCO Bureau of Statistics based on the 1974 Recommendation on International Cooperation and Peace, Education on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. While the global indicator provides guidance for the monitoring, it still has limitations for in-depth investigation of achievements and the situations in each country. The SDGs therefore stress the importance of national initiative and ownership in its implementation and monitoring. SDGs global monitoring also encourages countries to develop a feasible and effective monitoring system that fits their own particular context so as to check achievement and draw meaningful feedback. Against this backdrop, APCU, as a UNESCO Category 2 center and as a key GCED education center in Korea, has conducted relevant research and projects and developed a monitoring tool that is contextual and effective. The center has carried out a trial survey and analysis of the extent to which GCED is mainstreamed in Korea. Previous research focuses mainly on SDG 4.7.1, analyzing the extent of mainstreaming and implementation cases. As such, we can gain insight and monitor the policy environment. However, there are limitations in monitoring whether the policies brought change to the education field or whether they contributed to the goal of enhancing global citizenship among learners. As such, in this study, monitoring was based on the 6 thematic areas of GCED in continuum of existing research. But the focus of monitoring was placed on the learners' change and growth through GCED. We explored monitoring methods from 3 aspects: policy, teachers' GCED competency, and learners' global citizenship. To this end, we analyzed the extent to which GCED policies are mainstreamed in education, and we developed an instrument to investigate teachers' GCED competencies as well as the learners' global citizenship competencies, thereby proposing a more systematic GCED monitoring framework. First, the extent to which GCED was mainstreamed was analyzed by analyzing the GCED-related organizations and ratio of GCED-related policy initiatives. We collected and analyzed data on the organizational structure and 2020 work plans of 17 metropolitan and provincial education offices. According to the results, the percentage of staff in charge of GCED accounted for roughly 5%, and in some regions, there were departments or agencies dedicated to GCED. Next, in 2022, GCED-related policy projects accounted for roughly 10%, which is a rise compared to the previous year. The drop from 2019 to 2020 seems to be attributed to a change in the conceptual framework. As for 2021, it was likely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, the ratio of GCED policy initiatives as well as trends differed by region. Next, by the 6 thematic areas of GCED, sustainable development projects accounted for the most with 28.4%, followed by global citizenship, gender equality, cultural diversity, and peace. Now I would like to touch upon the development of an instrument for teachers' GCED competency. As you know, teachers play a critical role in developing and disseminating GCED. Teachers' lack of capacity is oftentimes considered a major barrier in the mainstreaming of GCED. In Korea, diverse efforts are made to enhance the capacity of teachers, including training, research associations, and the publication of related materials. However, more research is necessary to understand the specific impact of these efforts and to define teachers' GCED competency and ways to monitor and measure it. As such, in this study, we define the components of teachers' GCED competency as the ability to continuously cooperate and learn, as well as comprise and implement GCED curricula based on knowledge of and attitude toward GCED. And we developed items to monitor these components. Specifically, 24 questions were developed asking the teacher's self-efficacy in 8 sub-areas, including GCED knowledge and attitude, curriculum organization, lesson planning, execution, evaluation, management of cooperation networks, and learning practice/implementation. The table below are examples of questions developed through a process of reviewing prior research and gaining expert advice. Please refer to the table below for details. To check the validity of the questions, we carried out an online survey of 359 elementary and secondary teachers with the cooperation of 15 metropolitan and provincial education offices. An analysis of the results show all items measures the concepts intended in a reasonable and reliable manner. Although it is a preliminary survey result, if you look at the global citizenship education competency level of Korean teachers, the overall level is quite high. In particular, the awareness of the importance of GCED was found to be very high. On the other hand, teachers show relatively low levels when it comes to curriculum organization and learning implementation. Next, we conceptualized a learner's GCED competency from a competency standpoint as one that can be changed through learning of the 7 GCED thematic areas, namely global citizenship, gender equality, peace, human rights, cultural diversity, sustainable development, and media literacy. And we developed a conceptual instrument as well as 2 other types of instruments. The first type sets to measure cognitive and behavioral competencies. The premise was that the process was circular. A learner's cognitive and behavioral competency changes upon a complex interaction between knowledge and attitude triggered by learning of the 7 thematic areas. The behavioral competency then enforces and impacts the learner's attitude and knowledge. We developed the following set of items based on Bloom's taxonomy of remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. For the first type, we developed 42 questions, which includes 6 question items on cognitive and behavioral competency in the 7 thematic areas. Each question item was measured on a 5-point Likert scale. Here below is an example of some of the questions. Type 2 consists of 5 sentences with a hierarchical structure. Please refer to the table for an example of the specific questions. To check the validity of the questions, we carried out an online survey of 405 middle school students with the cooperation of leading teachers of GCED of the 15 metropolitan and provincial education offices. According to the analysis results, it was confirmed that all items of Type 1 and Type 2 reliably measure learners' global citizenship competency and can be used appropriately for the purpose of monitoring global citizenship education performance. Although these are preliminary results, the overall global citizenship competency level of Korean middle school students is slightly higher than the figures here that show what is the normal level or average. Also, in the case of Type 1, results show that there were differences in the educational experience of GCED by thematic area. So different thematic areas presented different levels of educational experience from the student's perspective. Here is a summary of the analysis results. And based on these results, I would like to suggest the following implications for monitoring GCED. First, in order to more effectively monitor implementation efforts in Korea and to utilize these monitoring results, we must establish an institutional basis for GCED monitoring. Currently, it is possible to objectively investigate and analyze the mainstreaming of GCED policies from an outsider's point of view, but there is difficulty in regular and continuous monitoring. Also, there is a limit to the feedback of monitoring results to the actual educational policy field. Therefore, in order to overcome these limitations, it is necessary to prepare a legal basis for the promotion of global citizenship education from a more macroscopic point of view, or we have to at least build an institutional foundation, such as a plan to activate global citizenship education at the central government level. Second, it is necessary to review measures to implement monitoring and disseminate the model by designating education offices leading GCED. Furthermore, for more accurate data research and monitoring, it is also necessary to work closely with local government and education offices that are interested in GCED to form a consensus on monitoring and to prepare institutional grounds at the city or provincial education office level. Therefore, it is necessary to designate a leading GCED education office, thereby jointly establishing a yearly plan for the purpose of monitoring, investigation, analysis, and feedback. We could also review strategies to gradually spread the monitoring results to other offices of education. Third, it is necessary to further promote the use of monitoring result indicators and results. The data collected for domestic monitoring serves not only as basic data to understand the implementation status, but can also be used as a basis for improving systemic citizenship education policies and program implementation. Therefore, in order to monitor the implementation of GCED on a regular basis, above all, it is necessary to analyze the survey data in various ways and to actively give the results back to central and local governments, metropolitan and provincial offices of education, as well as schools. Fourth, it is necessary to increase the reliability and utilization of the survey by linking the indicators and measurement tools with other surveys nationwide. The items developed in this study to monitor the educational process and performance, such as teachers' competency and learners' competency, must be regularly collected and managed through a specialized research institution. This will also contribute to revitalizing various studies as well as discussions on GCED in Korea. Lastly, we must continuously revise and improve GCED monitoring. Global citizenship education is being interpreted in various ways depending on the country's implementing agent, and the contents and practices are also being diversified. In addition, amid the shock and rapid social change caused by COVID-19, the values pursued by GCED and the competencies required of learners are also changing. Therefore, in the future, it is necessary to review and revise the index system and conceptual framework for monitoring GCED, and we must also continue to develop new indicators taking into account the changed educational landscape. This concludes my presentation. I would like to thank you all for your attention. I hope that these various discussions, including the research on establishing a monitoring system, will help establish and spread global citizenship education across the world. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much to Professor Park for that review of the local process, which I think highlights one very real issue, and that is this issue of global versus local. And we will come back to that. It's the matter of contextualization, and that's increasingly appearing in the fields of aid and development, monitoring and evaluation, and of course in curriculum development. And that's happening very obviously in Asia and in Africa, and I imagine elsewhere. And so we will come back to that particular issue in a moment. In the meantime, we'll move to a couple of comments in the chat. And the first item we'll put over to you, Ralph. So I hope the sun is starting to shine in Dublin. And I'll read out this to you. So the question is, as we know, there was an Asian version of ICCS to reflect the regional and the national contexts. Are you able to share how that went? Are you aware of what the challenges were? And do you have any perspectives on this that would be useful to our followers? Thank you.
Certainly. Yes, the sun is coming up. I don't know if we're going to see it today, but at least there's light behind this curtain. The regional modules in ICCS are something that I believe are quite unique to that particular study. At least I'm not aware of similar extensions elsewhere. There's been one in Europe that countries decided and deliberated on what aspects to include, one in Latin America and one in Asia. And I think it was a really useful and productive idea. But in the execution and in deciding what should be on this, aspects such as those, as also Aaron Benavo in his work with APCU, and Esther, you're quite aware of this work, the feasibility study on GCED monitoring and evaluation, and the different notions that exist within Asia. And it's not a monolithic entity. Neither is Europe or North America or Latin America have shown. So in my recollection, I wasn't intimately involved in that. I think there was at least a struggle to agree on what the interpretation of the information should be. We're absolutely open to try again. At the moment, the regional module in Asia is simply not obtainable given country uptake. We simply have too few to make this into an interesting report. But we did encourage the countries that collected data in 2016 to collaborate, to work together, and to organize regional events that discuss the data and contextualize it. And I'm really glad that you mentioned this sort of axis and this continuum between the local and the global. You know, if the only thing that survives from that topic is a single number in that larger orchestra of UN indicators and data, then of course we lose almost all of the context. And I think that's why it's so critically important that local researchers take a look at the data, contribute and partake in developing its framework, so also that the interpretation is localized and embedded in the needs and target setting and curricula that exist locally.
Thanks very much, Ralph. I'd like to turn now to another question, and it's been directed to Roshan. And the question is, could you please share more in detail about the SDG 4.7.6 thematic indicator, especially any future plans and timeline?
Yeah, I think Esther, you know better than I do, because you are the one who was leading it. So I think the thing is, like I just say, like the piloting has been done for the tools. Tools are there now, so probably some of the modification, and then it can be ready. But thing is, like how to now. The awareness building for the countries is a key part. So how we roll out at the country level. So UIS being a custodian agencies, we are focusing more on standards and the processes. So it is the countries and other partners need to take focus on it. So but again, I would say, like the sector planning is quite a heavy exercise in the country level. So and I think that is the time that maybe we can discuss with the country. So actually, the UNESCO is very much heavily involved in sector planning processes. So some of the areas where we might need to discuss with the colleagues in UNESCO and the UNICEF as well, who have been heavily involved in sector planning, its review processes, and then for assessment of this sector planning. Probably that could be the way to go ahead with the 7.6 to roll out in real sense. So I just said, like we can provide the framework and then standards, but the things need to be done at the country level and then partners together with partners. So we don't have clear timeline, but the advocacy with the discussion is going on with the different partners in that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roshan. And I will add to that, there's no doubt that the tool that was developed for 4.7.6, which Roshan described earlier, in terms of looking at planned and implemented and so on, as well as actually the contents of 4.7.6, which were around a breadth of skills. That, in other words, we need to equip both teachers and students with a breadth of skills if they're going to be able to develop global citizenship. And so it was clear from the pilot, which was administered under pandemic conditions, that in fact a tool or a survey tool like that can be used both in a digital transformation world as well as a on-the-ground world. And so I think it has great potential for use at the ground level to inform local perspectives. And that's one that I think we'll come back to again, because it informs this issue of global versus local. And that's incredibly important. And so, speaking of local then, we'll come to the most local we have here, which is, of course, Korea. So perhaps, Professor Joe, you can talk a little bit about whether the framework that has already been developed for the Korean work is sufficient, whether you need to do more with that. Where is it going to go?
Okay. I am part of the Professor Park research team, so if you allow, I'd like to answer to that question on behalf of Professor Park. The monitoring tool developed this year consists of 3 parts. The first part is about to analyze the mainstreaming of the GCE policies. The second part is about student competencies on GCE. And the third part is teachers' competencies on GCE. And I think the analysis of the first part is to analyze the annual business plan submitted by the local education offices from 17 municipal and provincial offices. And that analytic framework is very applicable to other countries' situation. But in terms of the student competencies and teacher competencies, mostly, I think most of the survey questions or tools are applicable to other countries, but some of them should be modified because, for example, we talked about the existence of national curriculum. And we talked about the specific areas of extracurricular activities incorporated into the existing curriculum. So those things are not actually present in other countries. So I think that some of them should be modified or contextualized to use the Korean framework in other countries' situations.
It's interesting. I think that's a real opener into your work, Rachel. And so if you're thinking about different, whether it's a measurement framework or whether it's an evaluation framework, that you've been working on one at the regional level. And so again, it goes to this matter of what is the transferability in these? Absolutely.
It's a tough one. That's what we're struggling with. I think, we're looking at a range of different tools, and of course we want to be as loyal as possible to our cohort and our context, looking at, we're working with and developing systems and tools for grade 5 or upper primary level students. So we want to gather evidence that relate to that cohort, teachers of that in those spaces, and schools who teach, primary schools. So I think from a research point of view, it's really important to look at studies and look at evidence that has been used in that context. And, I'm very interested to see the English versions of the tools that are used in Korea. I'd really love to see the teacher-reported competencies and the student-reported competencies and see whether there is alignment with our emerging framework.
Lovely. And there has been another question which we'll go to before we go to suggestions, which does CPLM have any specific questions on the digital citizenship aspect? Can you talk on that?
I'm not aware that it does, but I can take it on notice and ask my colleagues. I just did look at the 2024 round and it doesn't appear to have a digital citizenship component, but I can ask if there are plans to do so in the future.
Lovely, thank you. Which, of course, goes precisely to this issue of the degree to which the education transformation, digital transformation, might have not only on the teaching and learning around global citizenship, but the monitoring of global citizenship. And so on that note, I want to go to a final point and ask all of the panellists about their main suggestions for a way forward. And there are, I imagine, many, many ways forward. So if you can just think through just one point maybe that you think is seminal for us to think not only about global citizenship education generally, but what is the impact of an education transformation, aka a digital transformation? How do we put these things together? And so, first of all, I'll just stay with the sequence that we have. So, Roshan, do you have some thoughts and some words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think, yes, the data plays a key role in decision making for sure. And then there's a lot of data demand in different areas, so especially in education. But at the same time, we are still struggling the big data gaps in different areas. So probably without having a good quality data on different areas, whatever areas we take, especially in the areas of this GCED and then digital literacy, we are facing big data gaps. Even we don't know what is the situation. So without having that on lack of understanding, so it's difficult to ask or advocate for the making policies, and then also asking for planning and policies, even for asking for the countries to ask for the investment. Investing in different areas is quite challenging. So I would say like the one of the area that need to be focused now is how to improve the coverage of data. And then definitely, as Ralph mentioned, it is not only about global level to see like the global data can show something, but it is at the national level or local level that data need to be there, so that the discussions could be very evidence-based, and then that could lead to some kind of solid decisions. So I think now with the coming into this transformation education, where this focus is given to digital transformation, also in the training schooling, these are two areas where people are talking, and then now the indicators are also discussing over there. So probably these are the two areas where discussion is also talking about to benchmark at national level. So how much the countries want to achieve that one. So having this kind of benchmark could help countries to see like where the countries are moving, and then based on that, some kind of like policies plan can be developed. So I would say like this kind of combination of data, relevant data collected, and then used for planning and policies, but it should be at national level, and then building to the building the capacities of countries would be the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I noticed you did actually allude to one of the big issues, which we haven't spoken about, and that is that all of this monitoring costs money. And, you know, we blissfully disregard the fact that funding is needed, but it is, and that makes it very difficult for some countries to engage in monitoring or development of the tools for monitoring. So over to you, Ralph. Can you give us a thought?
Yeah, maybe or two. I think, as you know, the social spaces and the fabric of the ways that people interact with one another evolve, and much of it into the digital space. I believe that, and the technologies that are used, like online campaigns and so on, are evolving. I believe that the measurement will have to follow and trail this to remain relevant and valid and reliable. Take the case of ICRLS, it's computer information literacy, and you wouldn't find a way to emulate such an assessment on paper. We actually have receptive and productive strands with digital information and using a computer. There are no options. Take the case of our civic and citizenship education study, where we typically use, descriptions, short vignettes, images, and we ask kids on paper, how do you react to this? Now, much of this has been taken to the computer. So the entire space for the last 10 to 15 years has been transformed to computer-based assessment. But the jury is still out of what that means for those that may not have the familiarity as much, because they're not using it on everyday basis. Now, clearly, these days, more people do because of the pandemic and its long reach. But that's really of how to design an assessment that is inclusive and isn't cementing or poses an obstacle to monitoring, particularly at the level of students. And in some way, we just have to, with these studies, we just have to pick people up where they are. So many of the survey-only assessments and studies have gone completely online with just very few traces of paper, because just that's the way of how it's easier and actually expected by respondents to take such surveys. So we've seen a tremendous transformation in that particular field. And you mentioned cost. Yes, it does cost a lot of money. And for us who organize these studies internationally, it also means a large transfer of tasks and responsibilities, almost in a all eggs in one basket situation, to the international level, something that was distributed in a much different way across participating countries earlier.
Thank you, Ralph. Great. So we have just a few seconds. So, Professor Jill.
I'd like to suggest the issue of comparability among different data from different countries. The four presenters, I think they already mentioned about this issue. This is very critical. And in the process of the contextualization, I mean, the UNESCO really underscored the meaning of contextualization. And during the contextualization, individual countries may be engaged in some kind of conceptual gatekeeping in interpreting the meaning of GCE. So we can use ICCED survey, but also individual countries develop their own analytic framework. And when you consolidate the data from different countries, then there will be an issue of comparability, because we do not have kind of coherent, agreed upon framework to analyze the status of implementation of GCE. So I think that will be a big challenge in the future.
Thank you. And Rachel, the last word from you.
I think, I guess to sum this up, we really need to understand the complexity of the idea. The global citizenship education is about fostering global citizens, understanding the interconnectedness of all life on the planet, and the attitudes and values to make the world a more safer and just place. That's no mean feat, and that complexity needs to be reflected in pedagogies and assessment. Pedagogies that involve transformation, challenging views, rich experiences, hands-on learning. It really isn't possible, in my view, in my experience working in this space, to foster teaching and learning of global citizens with diluted surface level activities. It really is a transformative education process, and it needs to be reflected in curricula, assessment and pedagogy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we fairly glibly talk about something called global citizenship education that a majority of people in our societies would not know exists. And it may be seen by many traditionalists as yet another fad that goes by. We've seen that one fad, which was 21st century skills, didn't go by. it's increasingly implemented and integrated into education. And that's exactly what's happening here with global citizenship. If we think also about education for sustainable development, the concerns about climate change and the rest, obviously a construct such as global citizenship has a huge amount of responsibility to bear to help us and to help our children navigate a better world. So thank you to our speakers, both here and elsewhere. Thank you, all of you. And on that, we will close for the day. Oh, no, we won't. Sorry. We're not closing for the day. We're closing this session for the day. And we will be returning for the last session of the day, which is a panel. And that panel will be bringing together these 3 different concurrent sessions that have been running. And so I think it's a really great opportunity for you to hear not only about this monitoring aspect, but about the policy and the advocacy aspect, about the pedagogy and learning aspects. So please do join us at 17:30 Seoul time, 9:30 Paris time, so that we can draw together these 3 strands from today. So thank you all again, and we'll see you in a short while.
Thank you. Thank you very much.